Hey, everybody. Welcome. Oh, hold on. Google just logged me out.
Bscotch.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 182 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast, Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, and I'm full of RESTful APIs.
I'm Sam, and I'm drinking tea today instead of coffee.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today is Dark Ember, Sunny Gleam, 2018.
That seems sort of contradictory.
Well, no, because it's dark, but every now and then there's a gleam. That's
That was perfect. I have nothing to combat that with. That was very good.
We have one. Oh, yeah, before we start, we have a warning.
Profanity and stuff,
There's going to be swears. So, you know, just do whatever you got to do with that information. There's one episode left this year.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I mean, we're going to record two more, but you're only going to hear one more. So, what does that mean, really? Does it matter?
Doesn't matter at all.
All right.
The sun's just going to explode in 5 billion years. Who cares?
It certainly is. Also, before we get started, we'd like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. If you'd like to help support the podcast and help us keep our mics running, you can head on over there, and then we're going to take your money.
You got to keep this mic hot.
Yes.
Yeah, we burn the money under the
the
mics.
That's how you make the mic work. You have to keep it lit.
They're coal-fired mics.
It's coal is just
Also, it's
compressed
not
on a
very
hill.
well ventilated in here, which is why we have to keep the podcast capped at an hour because of the
asphyxiation risk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just a risk. It's just we are just slowly asphyxiating.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to get out of here before we're legally dead.
That's always true. That's just what breathing is.
Slowly asphyxiating.
Yeah. That's why you got to exhale because, you know.
Is
you die.
asphyxiating the lack of bringing oxygen in or the lack of putting carbon dioxide back out? Or is it both?
I think it's
Which one is it?
probably both.
Science says
either way.
I mean, either way, you're dead.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it just said we were talking with our dad this weekend, and he said, you guys should really put together a sort of what's that? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Emergency.
Like the
Lifeline.
phone call,
Lifeline.
And see, we don't even know what the fucking word is for that.
We would need to call
Someone
somebody to figure that out. Where we could then call them and be like, okay, so we don't know what we're talking about on this particular topic. Here's an expert or whatever. And
instead of bumbling around for a few minutes.
the problem is then we would just be calling people.
Yeah, I think
all the time.
importantly,
Every 5
we never
minutes.
know what the fuck we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another disclaimer for this podcast. Just we don't know.
Yeah, if you're listening to this looking for actual information, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, go to Wikipedia.
Yeah,
Call
And
your
give them some
lifeline.
money. They're looking for it right now.
yeah.
That's true. Yeah, they're still running their thing. Seth, you gave like $3 or something.
I did.
Seth's done his part.
I became a recurring Wikipedia.
There you go.
So that's going pretty good.
So you went to moneygrab.wikipedia.com.
Yep. And they grabbed my money, and I just kind of passed it through. I went over to the Bscotch podcast page. I was like, let's just plug this in, and I just
Nice.
we're now laundering
For
money
Wikipedia.
over to Wikipedia.
Right.
It's going pretty good for them. For us, I don't know what the point of that was. Let's get on to some studio news. Let's talk about Levelhead.
Yeah. So
Yeah, guys, let's do it.
So yeah, Levelhead's coming along, and the most exciting stuff, 2 parts. One is that we now have 49 levels that were built on purpose,
Yeah.
which is important. That essentially are supposed to take players.
I like the idea of building a level on accident.
Well,
It's easy to
it
do
is
in
very
Levelhead.
yeah.
You just trip over a rock and you've built a level.
You're like, "Bah-bah!" And then it doesn't necessarily play well for new people.
Yes.
So
But sometimes it weirdly does.
sometimes it does. Sometimes you have happy accidents, like a Bob Ross painting sort of
Yeah.
situation. But yeah, so we built these 49 levels, and then last week we were able to run through them as a person who hadn't played the game too much yet inside the office. It took like about 4 hours to beat the whole set. And interestingly, I also ran one of my friends through it, and he's a gamer, but he hasn't actually played any platformers at all. So this was a super interesting.
So he's got none of the visual language needed.
Never even played Mario?
never. Well, he played like Mario. Maybe he's like twice when he was a kid.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure everybody when they
He's
were
like
a kid.
played it, but not in any meaningful skill building way.
You found the one.
Yeah, yeah, a gamer who hasn't played Mario.
So how did he do?
It was very interesting watching because it took him forever to accomplish most things. Because of course it's hard.
Yeah.
It's actually a very hard game at the end of the day. And so the skill cap is really, really high on it. But mainly it was very amusing because I think he's also just the sort of person who zones in on like some semi-arbitrary goal. So he'll see a coin he just decides he wants to get.
Sure.
And then he'll just die like 100 times in service of trying to get that coin. And then as soon as he gets it, he's like, oh shit, because he still has the rest of the level.
He gets the tunnel vision.
Yeah. So it was very interesting to watch. I still got a bunch of good notes. But it brings up this really interesting issue with sort of the question of testing your game. Because if you're not testing it on the core demographic that you're targeting, then you can accidentally sort of like, shape it wrong for that other group. Because basically what I was noticing is when Sure was playing it, I only made a few things a little bit easier in different parts to sort of remove frustration from places where it didn't seem like it should be. But watching this friend of mine play, I could have like softened down everything.
You could just rebuild the whole game.
I basically should have rebuilt the whole game in order to sort of accommodate this way different pace of learning and everything else. The problem is that it would actually be super boring for people who have played, platformers generally.
So this begs a question. What if there was a sort of, when you first start playing, you can choose what your experience is, and we can insert like 5 or 10 sort of real
like buffer levels.
turbo rookie buffer levels.
The thing is, those first 13 levels do that already, where they sort of onboard people in. It's just that once they get out of that,
that's not the problem.
Yeah, that's not the problem. So it's a super interesting thing. So we got another playtest.
Those same
today.
people wouldn't survive the community levels.
Correct. Exactly.
Because they're going to be so hard and chaotic.
Yeah. If you cannot beat my campaign levels, then you will be torn asunder.
Does that mean we need just more mid-tier levels, but for not for like
I
the
don't know.
core player, but like as Seth is saying, not necessarily do we need to pad the one in the front, but do we need even like another track? For
I don't think so.
Noobs.
I think it's just sort of thing where it's. I mean, think about Super Meat Boy, right?
Yep.
It's just hard.
It's just hard as shit.
Yeah.
And like if someone picks it up and they haven't played any platforms before, that's going to be a bit of a rough entry, Even
But
if
the important thing is that if it's hard, you can still understand
yes,
what you need to do.
correct. Yeah, there wasn't a point where he was like, "Oh, I died because the game killed me," or whatever else. And so
He was always taking ownership of his own failures.
yes,
Which that's the whole point.
requirement. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting to watch. And I'm curious to get this other playtest in today, and then make whatever changes. But
There's the thing about platformers and similar and like puzzles and similar kinds of games where there is no difficulty thermostat.
Yeah.
There's nothing there's no knobs you can turn and just
Make
now
it
it's
easier.
easier or now it's harder or whatever. Unlike in a crafting game or but really any other game actually.
Yeah, you have to rely on the player's skill.
Yep.
And then as a level designer, you have to try to make sure they have the skills before they hit the point where they really need them.
Yeah, but if you miss as the designer, then it's like a puzzle, right? A puzzle you can either figure it out or you can't. Those are your two stages. And as a level designer for this kind of a level, it's the same deal. You either make something successfully for the kind of user who's going to experience it, or you don't. And if you don't, they just have a really hard time, and there's no kind of no way around that.
So yeah, I'm going to see kind of how the test goes today, and then figure out.
Well, this is an interesting challenge. I think we didn't have with Crashlands so much, because with Crashlands, the goal was to make a much more chilled out game that had optional difficult things. So the main people often comment on how it's interesting that the core boss fights against Hugo Duco are far easier than the side bosses that are totally optional. We said, well, yeah, because you don't have to beat those side bosses, but you do have to beat Hugo, right? And so if we made Hugo impossible to beat or extremely hard to beat, then most players would end up hitting a wall and then just getting upset and then not wanting to play anymore. And so with Levelhead, it's kind of the whole core of the game is the hard stuff.
Yeah. So I think it's that interesting thing where you at some point we have to decide and make a stance about who we're building the game for, right?
Yeah.
And that just has to be who it's for. And it's already happened where I've play tested it with my wife, and she can do those first 13 sort of on board, but then after that it starts getting stressful because the game does ratchet up in terms of its difficulty and stress level and stuff. It's just like not her sort of game, which has been super interesting for me because I don't think we've actually built a game that
pushes people
people out in an interesting way.
Well, Flop Rocket.
Flop Rocket was probably the
That
only
pushed
one.
people out real fucking
Yeah.
hard.
But I think
This is closer to Flop Rocket actually than anything else we built, probably.
Yeah, so it's important to recognize what the point of the game is, and it's not to give people an incredibly soothing and relaxed experience.
It's to make you feel like a total badass when you finally beat a level after like 40 minutes.
Which does mean that there's certain people who have certain personalities or whatever it's not necessarily going to mesh with, and we basically have two options now. We're at a fork in the road, which is we could either just kind of, shave off every rough edge and turn it into a sort of a bland, like, there's 50 levels in the campaign, but you kind of just get handed the win and it's very chill, or we could just try to refine the core vision of the thing, which is to just make some really hard shit, but that is beatable and clearly understandable.
I guess even with so one of my favorite games just ever was the old Super Mario World on SNES.
Yeah.
Which even in into adulthood, every once in a while I would go in and just replay the entirety of, which not going to do the whole thing in a short day. Yeah. Because I played it so much. I still in my mind, I'd forgotten basically everything in the universe, but somehow in my mind are still all of the fucking levels of this game. And I'm thinking about it, and so that early island, there's a handful of levels on, then you kind of move up to the next spot where you get the feather for the first time, right? And I'm thinking about how much harder that level is.
Yeah.
Than everything else that's happened before, and actually just how much skill it takes, because now all of a sudden you have to deal with flying, right? A completely new skill.
And they don't teach you how to use it at all.
They don't teach you how to use it. There's football players that are throwing these balls at you, right? And there are these diving creatures that are flying at you. And so now all of a sudden, this game, which was
easy,
pretty dang easy, but only for 5 levels or something, right? All of a sudden, ratcheted up the challenge enormously. And then right after that, you have things there's the cave when you go off to the side, with where the wall is chasing you. They actually ratchet the difficulty really fast. I now realize in retrospect.
Yeah. The difference is in a game like that is that you had 2 hit points. Right? Yeah. So you didn't die whenever you got hit. You died after you got hit twice if you didn't manage to pick up.
But they were very stingy with checkpoints.
Yes.
There was usually stingy. One checkpoint halfway through the level, and then that was it.
Yeah. Versus the way we tend to do is you die on contact with everything. There is no 2 HP situation, but the checkpoints are much more generous. So, and that's actually been the really interesting thing about it is I found that I can move, if I move a checkpoint just one hazard further into a level, then just people won't give up on it. Yeah. You just skip one thing that was just kind of an annoying thing that they had to do before the challenging thing that they were doing, and they're fine. They're like, okay, that's fine. I can keep on going.
Well, and you were talking about how you have to understand how the segments of your level break down in terms of the way people respond to it. So if you have a section of the level that's incredibly hard that people die on frequently, you can actually put the checkpoint further back than that, so that if somebody dies, they'll need to clear a few more obstacles before they get back to the really hard part. But you can't do that if the thing they have to get past first is a boring, mundane, here, grab an object, if it's carry it, pick up 10
if it's
coins.
Just pick up a few coins or something. Yeah, because basically what you're doing
is you're making them replay a boring thing.
Yeah, if replaying something that has no skill attached to it is horrible. In fact,
or even if there is skill attached, but it's just because I'm thinking about this with Hollow Knight, because Hollow Knight is also very stingy with its checkpoints, crazy stingy with its checkpoints. And the reason I ended up leaving the game and haven't gone back was because there was this one part where it was actually very hard to get from where I was from my checkpoint to where I needed to be. And once I got there, it was 10 times harder than that, right? So it was just hard and then super hard. And that hard part lasted, I would skip as much of it as I could, but I couldn't really skip it all. And so that hard part was basically 3 minutes long.
That's pretty fucking long.
Yeah. And then the super hard part was, I don't know how long, because I never actually.
You just would die.
But yeah, it was waves of enemies coming in, and it was that kind of a thing. And there were similar cases in that game also where the checkpoint is just so far away from where you want to be that you're just running through a thing you run through 1,000 times. You're killing some enemies again, whatever. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's super hard. But that was the thing that also kicked me out the last time too. Was just that the distance between a checkpoint and a hard thing I needed to do was always so long and filled with stuff that I just didn't need to be doing over and over again.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you balance these things out such that, because basically what you want to do is I don't care if someone leaves after beating a level in the campaign. If they're I need a break, because actually when I played Super Meat Boy, it took me I think 2 weeks to beat that game. But what happens is I'd play it in 35 to 45 minute bursts, and then I'd
you beat
nap.
one level.
Yeah.
I'd be then you go take a shower, get all the sweat off, and
then you just go leave.
And then you'd have the 1,000-yard stare for a couple hours, just kind of.
Yeah, you literally you almost have to do that in really difficult games because your brain has to sort of soothe and compile what just happened.
Process everything. And then but then what'll happen oftentimes too is maybe you'll get really stuck on a level. You can't beat it.
Yeah.
Then you take a break and you come back the next day, and then you just one-shot.
Yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah,
which is actually something.
It's just like real life problems.
Yeah, this is something that I, when learning how to play piano or anything like that, you'd often hear stories of musicians being like, yeah, like there was this one piece and I just couldn't get. I practiced it for 3 hours and I just kept stumbling over this one part and I just couldn't fucking get it. Went home, took a nap, went to bed or whatever, came back the next day. And then just bloop, boop, yep, no problem, just straight through. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think you just need to kind of like let your brain problem solve. And so we have to recognize what kind of game we're making and just be okay with what it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you try to defy what the game is, then you're going to end up with some really uncomfortable designs. Yeah, definitely. So then the other thing that we got in Levelhead this past week was exposure bucks.
Yeah,
which so we had talked, I think, two or three episodes ago.
We talked about it a few times.
Yeah, about this the problem of discoverability in these kinds of games, where you might build a level and then nobody plays it. And this is a big complaint that we see in the Mario Maker community, is that those levels in that game, which is that is the most popular game in the genre of Levelhead. And one of the biggest complaints people have is they'll build a level and then that's it. They have no way to get other people to play it. And so we actually have now in Levelhead several avenues to get your level played. One is if people subscribe to you, then your levels just get delivered to your followers. So if you make really good stuff and you get a bunch of followers, then just boom, you get a bunch of plays as soon as you publish a thing. But then the other way is to solve the problem of what if you don't? If you don't have those followers, then when you build your level, it first gets published into the test lab, which I think we were calling like the QA basement or something. But the idea is we don't know anything about this level, and it's just like we don't know how hard it is, we don't know what kind it is or anything like that, and we just need people to play it. So when your level goes into the test lab, you can then go play other people's levels in the test lab to accumulate what we're now probably calling exposure bucks. Yeah. So you just go play other people's levels and you get compensated for testing those other levels with exposure bucks. Mm-hmm. You then dump exposure bucks into your levels and it boosts them up the queue to the point where
basically the first thing people see when they open it up.
Right. Because what we know from our own experience in publishing games is that people don't scroll.
Correct.
They don't, and they rarely look past the first, oftentimes one thing on a list. Like if you ever Google search for something, like what do? You scroll past the ads and then you click on the first fucking thing after the ads.
Well, people scroll when they actually don't want anything that's being shown. Right. So like if you're on Netflix and you find yourself scrolling, just stop being on Netflix because
you've already decided.
You've already decided that nothing is of interest,
Yeah, and of course,
it's to deal with games, right? If you have to scroll, that's because like there aren't any games that you want right now,
or you just don't want to play games right now, or you're just lying to yourself about it, which we'll talk about later because I have some thoughts on that. So the idea is then what we've sort of created is almost a bidding system, right? Where if you don't have any followers, you can still make people see your level, by pushing it to the top of the list, by accumulating exposure bucks, by testing other people's levels, and then spending those exposure bucks on your levels, boost them up the list, boom, you're good. Mm-hmm. And so this is also, there's going to be a lot of churn here because once a level gets enough plays, then it gets kicked out of the test lab and it goes up into the tower, which is where all of the now like tested levels go. And so there's a sort of a time limit on how long a level is going to stay at the top of that list. And it's probably not very long, actually. Yeah. So if you kind of like, depending on time of day, there's going to be like surges of levels being published and stuff like that. And so maybe it'll be the case that like, maybe if you're in Australia, it's cheaper to publish levels because cheaper in exposure bucks. Right. Not like, but we're not charging real money for this course. I say, of course, as if that's a given.
Yeah,
a lot of other companies would try to do that, I'm sure. Yeah. So, so we tested this out last week, and it's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's cool because essentially what it does now is so we've been talking about finalizing the actual loop in the game. And the problem we've had is that you can play levels, you can build levels, but there's nothing quite that was linking the two of them together. So the QA basement, this whole test chamber idea, when it comes to these exposure bucks, essentially what the loop is now is maybe you'll hop in the campaign, you'll play for a while, and then you'll unlock a bunch of new goodies because you hit some new point in the campaign. And then you're like, oh, cool, I'm going to go build a level. And then when you publish it, it says, oh, you just published this level. If you want it like to get plays and to get plays faster, go play through a few levels in the test chamber, and it'll give you some exposure bucks. You can use some of the things. So now you go play 5-10 levels, and then you just dump all your points into that thing, and then you see it go in, and then it disappears, and then now you're getting notifications about how many plays it's getting out in the wild. So it's this really cool thing where like the circle's finally closed, basically, where previously it has not been the last year.
Well, it's also nice because it gives you, no matter who you are, it gives you a guaranteed sort of X number of plays from other people on the levels that you make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then after that, the rest is on you. So if you didn't make a good level, then once you get past those guarantees, like that's probably the end of it, right? If you made a really good one, then maybe some of those people who played your levels are going to follow you now to see the other levels.
Or share it around or whatever else.
Right. So everybody will have every person who plays this game. This is a crazy claim, but I realize it's actually true. Every person who plays this game will have the opportunity and the ability to put their level at the top of the list for at least some amount of time, right?
Very short.
It'll probably be very short because either you'll be outbid or your level will pass the test. Yep. It'll get enough players and enough plays that it gets bumped out. So then the next kind of, I think, obvious question is, okay, so you've got this testing basement where you just got this very specifically ordered list of levels that are not vetted for quality or anything. They're just in there, and anybody who makes a level can push that level to the top of the list, right? With enough effort. So if you are looking for good levels to play, how do you reconcile this system with that? And so this is where that tower comes in. So we basically need to frame it properly, but where the test lab or test chamber, whatever it is basically the Wild West of levels. It's just chaos in there. Things are not sorted by difficulty. You can't look them up by topic or tag or anything. It's just an ordered list, top to bottom. And so, but we also assume that when people play those levels, if they open up a level that is clearly fucked up, where like they can't get past the first 1.5 seconds because it's clearly rigged around some kind of a bug or whatever it is, they're going to boot that level up, play it briefly, and be like, fuck this, and then leave, and then go to the next level on the list. Because people still want to have a good time, even if they're playing test levels. And so as that happens, we are accumulating statistics on how people engage with these levels. So if we find that the average player jumps into your level, plays it for 1.5 seconds, and quits, then by the time it gets out of the testing chamber, it is now at the bottom of the best levels sorting out.
We basically, once you get out of QA,
nobody will see it ever again.
Nobody will ever see it again.
Once levels go into the tower, they are actually ranked by essentially a metric that we're making in the background to try to guess the best stuff. So the nice thing about this is it actually separates the population, because a lot of people who play platformers, for example, don't actually want to build levels, or maybe in 50 hours of playing after they've played a ton of levels, maybe at that point they're like, I want to try this. But not everyone's going to want to do it immediately. And so what this allows you to do is, if you're just a player and you want to come in and just play like a bunch of really good, platforming levels or puzzle levels or whatever else, then you can literally go to the tower, you search for certain difficulties, and then you're just there having an infinite level smorgasbord and having a good time. But if you're the sort of player who wants to, be on the fringes and like make levels for people, then you also have this completely separate avenue for doing that. So it's this really cool duality that I think was going to be super fun to see kind of how it plays out with other players. Yeah,
you're going to end up with the people who are really passionate about building levels almost exclusively spending their time in the workshop and the test chamber.
Yeah.
And they'll just be like playing each other's levels and stuff. And then everybody else also benefits because if all you want to do is play good levels, you don't have to go in there. You don't have to get exposure bucks, or you don't have to publish. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You could just boot it up and play good shit. And it's a piece of cake.
And if you do publish a level, you also don't have to go play other people's levels if you don't want to. It's just that now, since you're not giving back to the community, they don't have to give back to you.
Exactly.
Your level's still published. Other people could find it if they know what the share code is and go find it on purpose, right?
Yeah, you could tweet it out.
Yeah.
You could maybe, if you've got subscribers in the game, they'll get your level and they'll play it.
Yeah, so you might actually, so people who are doing really well might then get pulled up out of the test basement anyway, even without actually going in there themselves.
So what you would have is people who are really popular creators. Actually, we assume they're popular because they're making good stuff.
Yeah.
And so they don't really have to. They don't need to engage with the masses. They can just they publish their level. It'll get enough plays from their own fan base or whatever that it'll just automatically pass.
So the idea is that we provide a mechanism for those people who don't already have that
Yep.
And then,
which is most people.
And then for those that do, then they don't have to participate.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to watch the bidding wars unfold as people dump mountains of exposure.
The part I'm the most worried is not quite the right word, but the most unsure about how we're going to solve exactly is the timing part. Because things get downloaded from the level gets downloaded. Like you do a search to find out what the top exposure bucket levels are, right?
Yeah.
But that search is going to be stale the instant you get those results back.
Yeah.
Because the top levels are also being played by other people right now, right?
Yeah.
And so if that cap, even if the cap is fairly like medium, so say like it needs like 50 players and like 1,000 plays or something like that. Which sounds like a lot, except that if that thing is at the top of a search result,
it's going to be.
Everyone's going to download it. And it's going to instantly have those numbers. And now we need to get it off of that list as fast as possible. But everybody's already done the search, right?
Yes.
So we have a really interesting conundrum that we're going to have to figure. I have no idea how we're going to solve that.
I've got some ideas, but it's very in the weeds. So
okay, we won't do
it. So there are definitely some interesting challenges with this kind of a system.
As always.
But yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. All right, let's talk about industry news. The battle continues. All right, so the past couple weeks, it's been Steam. So it's 2 weeks ago. It's only been 2 weeks. Steam announced that they were going to be changing their royalty breakdown. Normally, it's 30% across the board, where Steam takes basically a third of your money for publishing on Steam. And that has been the industry standard across all platforms. No matter who you are or whatever you're publishing on, any distributor who's a digital distributor is basically just taking 30%. Epic, creators of Fortnite, came out the 2 days later or the next day or something.
It was next week, but yeah.
It
was the next
week?
Yeah. It doesn't matter, but that is what happened.
Yeah.
They came out with an 88-12 split.
They came out with an 88-12 split. And then they said, we're opening up our own store. It's going to be an 88-12 split. And then that has started a big sort of like speculation about what's going to happen in the industry now, because they're also clearly getting a lot of really good developers. A bunch of developers are ditching Steam, and it's just causing a lot of turbulence. So then one thing we also know is that Discord opened up their store
a while ago,
6 months ago. I don't know, 4 months, some time ago. And that hasn't really seemed to have had the impact on the industry that maybe we would have anticipated. Because if you think Discord has a couple 100 million users, and you'd think, and it's also built around a gaming audience, and you would think that if they open up a store in Discord, that's the perfect opportunity. But something about it didn't really seem to stick. And we were able to kind of discern this by looking at things like looking at games that were being launched in the Discord store. And oftentimes they would link to that community's Discord server. And even games that were featured at the very top for a long period of time, you'd look at their Discord server and they would still only have a couple hundred people in there.
Yeah, so it didn't seem like it was somehow transferring whatever. Yeah,
right. And so something about that wasn't quite going. And then Discord, I think, is probably trying to figure out like what can we do to kickstart this thing. And so Discord came out Friday or something and said, hey, we're doing a 90-10 split now. We're not doing a 70.
And we're going to open it up to any developer, because the original plan, as I understood it, was that it's going to be a carefully curated thing. And in fact, that was what they were selling for the platform, was that
high quality.
Hey, we know Steam, you can't find anything because it's all a pile of garbage with some good stuff on top. And they're like, we're not going to do that. We're just going to have the good stuff, right? And that was kind of their whole pitch originally. My impression is that's my second reason why I think that this has not worked out, is because the only reason you would do that and then like open it up and go directly against your original rationale for why you were doing it was because that first thing didn't work.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's a bit concerning to me for Discord, because I like Discord as a company. I like the product. But if they were banking on being a store, it's not looking so good. And so then I don't know what that means for Discord.
Yeah, well, and I think there's an interesting this bidding war now of the royalty split is aimed purely at developers.
Yeah,
and
players don't give a fuck.
Yeah, there's an interesting problem here, which is players just want to play a good game, and it should be easy to get and play.
And
right?
they might want some additional sort of meta level things from the thing distributing the game. I don't know if that's really true. I don't know how important it is, like
I think
achievements and these kinds of things are.
The 90% of the gravity comes from the game with something like these.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so this is where I think there's a problem, because Epic is clearly using their 8812 plus probably a bunch of Fortnite money to get a bunch of developers who are making really high quality stuff to do exclusives on the Epic Store. And Discord did have some exclusives, but they weren't necessarily these like big name.
They weren't things people were
games.
excited about.
Yeah. And so, and it probably was the case that because they were originally doing a 30-70 split, then it's an unknown quantity. It's a new platform. Yep. It's really hard to get people to agree.
It's not only that, they actually just don't have the money because I know that they raised something like $200 million in capital for their last round of funding, or which sounds like a fucking incredible amount of money, and it is. But when it comes to
200 million
game,
users, and you're running all the server infrastructure.
Yeah, but more importantly, when it comes to a game, if you're a developer and you're trying to sell your game somewhere, the range of income you can make off of that thing, or the revenue, is between 0, or I guess a loss, right? I guess if we're just talking revenue, so revenue 0 to just the sky, right? Like it can go fucking anywhere. You can
billions a year.
Yeah, people have made $20 million off of a game, $50 million off of a game, whatever. That doesn't happen to almost anybody, but it does happen. So now you're a developer, and then somebody says to you, "Hey, we want to give you a deal where we'll pay you a bunch of money up front for you to be exclusive on our platform." Right? The amount that they have to pay you is has to be enough to offset the chance that you might have made $20 million off of that game, whatever, right? Which means they have to pay a lot.
Yeah.
Even for like a medium game in order to,
because again, nobody knows whether a medium game, quote medium, will actually just go crazy.
It's quite unpredictable.
Right. Because you could look at a game like Minecraft and be like, "The fuck is this?"
Yeah.
Right. And
what
most people did.
Yeah. This looks like shit.
And that's a $1 billion game, right?
Yeah.
So now somebody like Discord is in a position where they have to say, okay, well, if we want exclusive titles so that people have a specific reason to come to us, then we can either have like 3 or 4, right? And that's going to use up all of our fucking capital that we just raised. Or we can go for more like, we can try to find sort of like maybe some gems, that nobody knows about yet, where the indies are like scared that they might not make any money at all or whatever. So like whatever we can give them, they're just going to be like super pumped that they don't have to quit.
Pay a lot less, but promise featuring and other stuff.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And that seems to be what their model is, which I think probably has to be because even though they have a fuck ton of money,
it costs a fuck
ton of money. They don't have enough left over.
Yeah. And so what they've ended up with is these sort of like indie titles that nobody, like I hadn't heard of any of their exclusives. I'd literally just never heard of them. I also don't keep a strong pulse on the indie industry, so I don't really know what's going on anyway.
Industry.
The industry. So I don't know. Maybe people were very aware of these. I'm not sure. But I didn't know about any of those things, and even actually their titles in general. It's a lot of like kind of older, pretty successful games, but significantly
like Roller Coaster Tycoon and stuff.
Yeah, there's like some pretty old stuff in there, and then a lot of indie stuff, and some really like critically acclaimed indie stuff, but not so many like huge blockbusters, right? Is basically what they have in their store. And so they do have a nicely curated list. Like it seems like it's all good games, but it's also not the games that everybody already knows about. But they're in a weird position anyway because like they built their whole thing on top of all these other platforms, and so
it's very And the thing that I keep coming back to is what is the value proposition to players? And I think for Discord, it basically comes down to like, well, you're here already.
Yeah,
like that's
that can be enough.
That can be enough. But you also need to be like, well, you're here already, and like, while you're here, why don't you check out our amazing catalog of extremely high quality
and that's why they have
games.
That's why they have the whole Nitro. Like, if you are in Nitro, you get just access to a subset of the games for free, and they have all that stuff in there. But the thing is, like, that doesn't make you any money. That just costs you money, right? So, like, if you're doing Nitro as like a subscription service, they had to pay the developers presumably to be a part of that because they had to guarantee that they were gonna make some money off of that.
Yeah, and
that means it's probably just a net cost for Discord to like run a service like that.
Yeah,
which means they're operating at a loss probably on that part, which is the part that people now just get more free because they're already in Discord, right? So they were getting free stuff. They bought Nitros because they wanted to support Discord. Now they also get free games. That's great, but why would they then go and like buy other games?
I'm still a big believer that for games, I think this isn't necessarily true for something like Netflix or whatever because it's a very passive medium. But I think for games, I think a subscription service is bad.
Yeah.
In the sense that, like I have Nitro on Discord, and I opened up the list and I'm like, oh fuck! Apparently, I have all these games now. I have them.
Parkosaurus.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of them wanted to try. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a bunch. I think those ones are not necessarily in the Nitro subscription, but there are a bunch in the Nitro.
Tooth and Tail.
Yeah, there were a bunch in Nitro that I had been wanting to play for a long time, and all of a sudden I had all of them. And for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to download any of them. I looked at all the list and I was like, well, I'll get back to these later. But it kind of reminds me of that sort of like weird, what's the word? Like that weird kind of malaise that sets in when you're looking at the Netflix front page and you're just like
choice paradox.
Yeah, you're in choice paralysis mode. Which is interesting that something like the Epic Store is just doing like, hey, one free super fucking good game every 2 weeks. Which is a very different thing because I made sure to get on there and download Subnautica.
Yep.
Which, by the way, will still be free while you're listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
So go get that.
Yeah. And so it's like, hey, here's one just fucking amazing game that we know you're going to love because it has the stamp of approval from every person in the universe versus, hey, here's 200 games. I don't know. But
good luck.
Some of them are probably good. There's a lot of them. Some of them are
I want to
old.
get back to that.
Because now I have to do a bunch of fucking research.
Yeah. But so now compare Epic versus Discord, right? So Epic is effectively has like the subscription thing, right? Except it's completely free.
Yeah.
But they're rolled out every 2 weeks, right? They're giving you a reason to come back every week.
I don't have to choose either.
You don't have to choose. There's just
a
one
really
thing.
good game.
And it's a really good game, which most importantly means because that first one is Subnautica, right? Subnautica, they are not in need of cash. They're doing fucking great. Yeah. They've sold an ungodly number of copies of this game, which means that if Epic came to them and said, hey, we want to give your game away for free on our storefront, because that also means that any player who's aware of that is not going to go fucking buy it on the other platforms it's on because they can go get it for free for those 2 whole fucking weeks, which
during
is insane. During December.
Yeah.
Which means that Epic had to directly pay an ungodly amount of money,
and they did. They could and they did.
And I think so. They're in a position where they can actually pull this off potentially because the amount of money required to do it, to offer this kind of people, to not only just say you can have a game for free, but like you can have one of the best available games for free. And yeah, there's just nobody else can come close to that. The capital required, or when it comes to the exclusives, right?
Yeah.
You can't just say, well, yeah, we've got exclusives, but we actually have some of the best exclusives, like the fact that the next Supergiant game is in exclusive early access on their platform.
It's all good stuff. Yeah. I mean, so what worries me about this is just that I feel like Discord is doubling down on a bad move.
Yeah.
I think the subscription service was probably not the way to go if you want to create the feeling of like an extremely curated, high quality premium platform. By just populating it with a bunch of older games just to like have stuff in the catalog that people now just already have on accident. Because to get people to care about something, they need to get it on purpose, not like just.
I think what they were doing with the mistake they made is they got people to care more about Nitro.
Yeah.
Right. Which was this almost pointless thing that you don't need so strongly to like use Discord. You don't need their whole like Nitro upgrade thing. You don't need it to the point that it's almost like I actually didn't buy. I wanted to support Discord, but I felt weird about buying it because
it doesn't have.
If they had just said like, if you just give us $40, like we'll feel great about that. Like we'll give you a badge or something, right? Like something that literally did nothing. I'd be like, okay, cool. I feel way better about this, right? But the fact that they were just selling me these like very minor upgrades that I didn't need at all, and sort of like they almost admitted it, like in the thing, there was something that actually felt worse about that. And I kind of think that they did like this. They just doubled down on this with the Nitro, because now you bought a thing for no reason just because you wanted to support Discord, and now all of a sudden you get free games too
on accident. But then I think the issue is by opening up the platform, they're no longer differentiating themselves from Steam. You know, I mean, and I think that was the original point, was saying like, hey, we're going to be like really highly curated and stuff. And the biggest gripe that players now have about Steam is the volume of games.
Yep.
Well, if you really want a floodgate to open up, just take away all the curation, So
it was just when we wonder if they're going to do, because they were talking about doing this, and I guess they didn't say like when in 2019, but they said it's sort of the implication was like literally when the new year starts, so which would be a pretty fast turnaround. The question is like, what kind of tool are they going to have for developers to upload their stuff? That's going to be if you're going to have an open platform, right? Then it's going to be a hard one. But then is there going to be any featuring opportunity at all? Is that going to be a thing? Like, how's that going to work? How's our discoverability going to work? Because the whole reason that they launched as a curated storefront was to have to not solve discoverability.
Right.
That is literally the only reason to have a niche storefront that just has a certain subset of games in it, is not because that's good, but because discoverability is so hard. It's a good idea to not try to solve that problem if you can help it.
Yes.
Because it just isn't better to be on a storefront that isn't Steam just because Steam has too many games. Like that is a nutty, ludicrous thing. Right? It's because it's hard to find the good games, and Steam
Which means you got to solve it better than Steam.
Right. And Steam does a remarkably good job actually of surfacing content.
Yeah.
And they've been working on it for a decade, right? Especially the past 5 years.
And it's a hard ass problem.
It's a very hard problem. So
hard ass problem.
Yeah. So if you're going to go now walk into this space and just, suddenly open up your floodgates and try to take them on, it's just hard to imagine that happening well, because probably what's going to happen is that there will be some subset of people who love Discord and prefer it. They'll use Steam to find the games they want, and then if those games are also on Discord, they'll go buy. So actually, how people use GOG.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a GOG situation, which doesn't necessarily bode well.
No, it doesn't.
So we'll kind of see. I think we're kind of at the cusp of potentially some interesting fracturing happening across the PC distribution.
We'll keep our eyes on it.
Yeah, we'll keep our eyes on it. We'll keep everyone apprised. We'll wildly speculate with no basis for our opinions.
Yep,
as we do.
That's how you do podcasting.
Do we have any? Do we want to make any explicit predictions at this point?
I think over the next couple years, the Epic Store is going to take a pretty hefty chunk of Steam's market share, and I think Discord is going to probably not do that.
That's my guess.
Yeah. My only worry is that Discord over-invests in this and then kind of tanks, and then because I fucking love Discord. So
the thing is, if it is weird to me that they have no mechanisms to monetize the whole thing that they did in the first place. You notice also every time they make an announcement about selling games, they're very careful to spend at least half of that same announcement talking about how they're still going to be investing in the thing that they actually came out to do first, which was make a good voice and chat client, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like they got those kind of weird things they've meshed
together.
Too many things. And they could have monetized the fuck out of their actual platform, and in ways that weren't gross. They absolutely could have done it, because and they did it with Nitro. Nitro was a little bit too pointless, right? Or no, it wasn't pointless enough, actually, right? But if they actually,
it was in the uncanny valley.
It was in the uncanny valley. But if they actually had real things that real services that were clearly costly or whatever that they then provided at a premium or whatever, or just shit like letting you modify your servers to a larger degree if you spend some money to get access to some editing features,
custom backgrounds and shit like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we'll see. All right, let's get on to talking about life, talking about the world, talking about people.
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading this book called Selfie.
Yeah, you mentioned it a few times. What about it?
By Will Storr. It's called Selfie, but it's not about selfies. It's not about social media. It's about the self and about where our concept of self comes from. What even is yourself? How are you a conscious person? All that shit.
Is there any reference in the book whatsoever to selfie as we know it today?
To the social media thing?
Taking a picture of yourself.
I think there are some.
Okay, good. Because I was going to say I'm trying to figure out if that's a good sell or a bad sell to call it, because I would actually actively avoid a book called Selfie.
Yeah, I think it was a bad move, but yeah, and so I think we talked maybe a week or two ago about this elephant rider metaphor, about the idea that you are actually not really fully in control of yourself, and really you're kind of just gently trying to steer this giant beast that's kind of doing its own thing. And most of the time, you're not really actually succeeding at it. So one of the more interesting concepts in this Selfie book is the idea of the personal narrator. And this is the idea that actually you might not be in control of this elephant at all, just at all. So instead, what you are is you're a storyteller riding the elephant with no control over it, and instead convincing yourself that this is where you wanted to go the whole time. So they did some experiments back in the 60s with patients who had split brain surgeries. So this was the lobotomies, right? Where they would
not lobotomy. That's a different
split
thing.
brain is when you slice the corpus callosum, which is the tissue that binds the left.
Right.
brain.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Different things.
Yeah.
So this was to prevent some kind of major seizures that would happen. And apparently it did do that, but it also had these bizarre side effects because once your two halves of your brain don't communicate directly with each other, then it turns out that each part of your brain takes care of sort of different subject matter, and weird things happen. And so what they discovered in this experiment was that that I can't remember which half of the brain it is, but this sort of like self-narration thing occurs in one part of your, like one half of your brain.
Yeah. It's gonna be the left side because it's language.
It'd be the all right, so left side. So they and your eyeballs go to the opposite side.
Yeah, you're mirrored.
Yeah. So they found that if they basically sort of like put a divider in front of the person's face, so that each eye was sort of like seeing different things, they could show the person a set of instructions in their left eye, which would then go to the right side of their brain, and they would start doing that thing. And then they would ask the person why they were doing it. And they would always have a reason.
Even it wasn't because they just read some instructions.
Right. So the instruction would be like, get up and go to the next room. And the person would stand up and start walking. And then the director would be like, where are you going? And they're like, I'm thirsty. I'm going to go get some water.
Right. And so they're fitting a narrative around what is actually uncontrolled behavior.
Yes. Yeah.
Or unknown behavior.
So the basic idea is, you start doing a thing generally against your own will. And then you just kind of explain it. Mm-hmm. You're like, yeah,
of course, that assumes that by that severing your two halves of your brain didn't change where the instructions are coming from.
Right.
Right. Because there's no reason why they couldn't have been coming from the other side of the brain in the first place.
Right.
Therefore, like,
well, yeah. So I think this is kind of the idea behind this experiment was basically saying like there's something going on here in the sense that that people have a remarkable capacity to explain why they're doing things, even if they have never actually made a decision that they're consciously aware of about why they're doing that thing. And so I was thinking, I was kind of in like a weird spot this weekend. And it's something that I've been kind of struggling with for a few months at least, about like when I'm at work working on Butterscotch stuff, I'm having a great time. I'm part of a team. I've got a clear sense of direction. I come in, I've got all kinds of projects I'm working on. And then when I go home, I don't have that stuff. I kind of float around and for the longest time I had a suite of projects that I was working on. So maybe like playing the piano or learn how to build electronics or that kind of stuff. And over time, I kind of drifted away from doing those things and ended up in a set of default states that were very like passive kinds of behaviors, like maybe just like find a new show to watch on Hulu or something and then just like watch through that whole thing. Or like find a fiction book series and just, read through that voraciously. And so, these are all totally passive activities that I don't really care about.
Not requiring a lot of self-direction basically to get it.
Yeah. And I found that I was kind of like dreading going home because I would have to figure out what to do. And I would know that I would invariably end up not doing anything that I really cared about and instead doing one of these things. And it's really been like emotionally sort of bearing on me, this general like floatiness or like feeling like I'm just kind of drifting. And one of the things that as I was reading this book, I started thinking, like reflecting on my own sort of internal narration of this stuff. And I realized that I had sort of like gotten into this weird place where I had convinced myself that I don't care about like playing the piano. I don't care about learning calculus. I don't care about like learning another programming language, because if I did care about those things, then I would be doing them. Right. Mm-hmm. As opposed to the idea that I wasn't doing them because I'm a person and I have this like dopamine drip that comes from like short-term satisfaction rewards, right, like watching a YouTube video or something like that. And that your brain will always build habits around the path of least resistance unless you actively push against it.
Well, the path of most reward, actually.
Path of most reward, yeah.
Yeah.
With the least amount of effort.
Yeah.
And so I realized that basically at some point a while back, I had allowed one of these bad habits to creep in. And that started crowding out the things that I wanted to be doing.
You mean because it essentially convinced you that you didn't actually want to do any of these things?
Yes, because I talked myself into thinking that there was no point to doing these things. So, because I was like, I'm never going to be a concert pianist, so why the fuck would I play the piano? It doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to be like a robotics engineer, so why would I learn how to do that, right?
I'm not going to be a chef, so why would I make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Exactly. And so
I'm not going to be a human, so why would I stop being a blob?
Yeah. And so it was interesting because like, so I read this book and like yesterday I was kind of drifting around and I had that kind of, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but like, you've got a couple of things on your mind. We're like, yeah, I definitely want to do these things today or whatever. And then you just keep not doing it.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I still have not installed my bidet.
Yeah.
Get on that because I want to use
my
that.
list.
Yeah. And so
I'm not installing it for you to use.
Well, maybe it'll give you some extra, kick in the pants to
or
do
maybe
it.
it'll give me an extra kick and not in the pants.
and so like, so yesterday
it's kind of something gross about it,
Someone's got to be able to use
So yesterday I had nothing to do and I still didn't do the things that I wanted to do. Right. And so this kind of like led to this crisis point.
Yeah. I hate those days. They happen sometimes.
And so I started like, I really dug deep. And so I did a bunch of journaling and I was kind of reflecting on what I was reading in this book. And I was like, I think I see what's happened, where I've over several months, I've developed a suite of bad habits. And then I have rationalized those bad habits into changing my opinion about the things that I really actually care about to make me not care about them so that I would feel less bad about not doing them. Right.
Oh, another question is, as a consequence, do you truly not care about them now? Right?
Because you could take it either direction.
Yeah. Is it a lie that you don't care about it? Or is it that your brain is telling yourself? Or has your brain successfully convinced yourself to not care?
No, because what I did was then I was like, okay, what do I care about? And of course, maybe I don't care about like doing electronics or whatever. I think there's something like on a deeper level, which is I care about building things. That's something that I love doing, right? I care about stuff. Yeah, I care about like learning new things. I care about working as part of a team. I care about making interesting, meaningful progress toward goals. I care about being challenged, And so basically I kind of like laid down my value system. And then I laid down a list of all of the activities that I normally do on a weekend or an evening or something. And I was like, fuck, none of these line up at all with the things that I actually care about. Which would then explain why I feel like I'm just kind of in like a mindless, stupid fog, right? So then like once you frame it in terms of like how do the things I'm doing square up against the things I care about, then you realize there's no connection there. Then it makes it much easier to just start doing other things,
It did. So I turned in my final art assignment on Saturday night at 10 p.m. And this is for those two classes I've been taking for the last 8 or 9 weeks, and the combination of those two classes has added between like 8 and 16 hours of artwork outside of the studio for these courses. And so I turned the final one in on Saturday, and I was so excited to be done with it because I was like, oh my God. So I turned in, and then I woke up on Sunday, and my ritual for the last 2 months on Sunday has been wake up, finish some other assignment because the other one used to be due on Monday, and then start the next week's lecture series for the other class. So I would do art for at least 4 to 5 hours on Sunday as well. And I woke up and
you were probably like, yes, I don't have to do it.
Well, yeah, I was like, yes, this is awesome. And then I was just sitting there, and then I was like, what do I want to do today? And so I had a similar thing, but it was a little bit different because I think because I've had some pent up stuff that I've been wanting to do, but haven't had the time to do. And so made my list, and then just went downstairs, basically read.
Because those were things that you were being told not to do in effect, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, I went downstairs and read for like 2.5 hours. I haven't read a book in a while. So I was reading, and then came back upstairs and did some more reading and some journaling and some other stuff. Basically things that I have not been able to do for like 2 months. But I did hit on this interesting thing. This happened before between projects that I've had like in my personal life. There was one point I think during the summer where I had a 2-week sort of gap between the big things I was working on. And in those cases, if I don't have a structure to sort of be applying myself to, where there's a thing I want to do, and then I have sort of laid out the roadmap and then just start working on it, then I definitely hit this sort of weird drift point where I'm just kind of like, I just kind of start existing in a very strange way, and then I get very mopey about it.
Yeah. If you haven't made an active decision about your goals and the structure of how you're going to get to those things, then you end up just going down whatever is the easiest, quickest reward, which is invariably something on the internet.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, you can, there are some times where I've decided to be like, all right, I'm just gonna fuck around for like today, and then those are usually really fun days. But it's the days where, like you said, where you haven't decided anything, or where you have this feeling like, I feel like I want to be working on these things, but then you just don't for some reason. Those are the worst by far. Yeah, but this kind of speaks to that the idea that you are driven oftentimes by things that you don't necessarily understand or recognize. And so maybe it's like the addictive craving of the dopamine drip of like going through, Reddit or Twitter or whatever. And that's what your like brain really wants to do right now. And consciously you're like, yeah, but I got to do this laundry. And so instead what you'll do is you'll definitely not do the laundry. And you'll also avoid doing the obviously bad thing. And instead you'll pick a third bad thing. It's like, you're like, and so instead you'll go on YouTube or something else because, well, at least I'm not doing that. Yeah. And so, you feel like you're in control of the situation, but really you're just kind of like you're like slowly angling your brain's bad impulses towards some other bullshit. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of an interesting way to think about things. Yeah. So they are. I mean, the framing is interesting though, right? Because it's not that those are bad impulses from your brain, right? At all. It's just a thing your brain wants to do. The reason it's bad is because it's incongruent with what it's the outcome. Some part of you has like a longer term goal of some sort that is directly contradicted by your brain's natural tendency just to be amused, right? Yeah. And so it's not bad at all to be amused or to seek amusement. We feel like it's bad because we want to have done other things. We want to be better than that. Yeah. Yeah. we want to be more than that. Yeah. Because again, I don't think it's a good bad thing. I think it's just like there's this other thing you could be doing, which is not just being amused. Yeah. Right? I've always felt like the word consumer should be a bad word. Like you could be a builder or a creator or a thinker or whatever, but being a consumer, like that's the lowest form of like activity, right? Like that's just being amused. Or like you're eating, you're watching, you're just like absorbing materials. I don't know if it needs like a moralistic thing applied to it, because like it's a thing that everybody does. Well, I know, but it is enjoyable. Yeah. Like I don't think it's bad to be very good at, for example, enjoying delicious food or great television or whatever else. I think it's just the case that if you land in typically is how it works for most things, which is like if you land in a camp where your identity is solely defined by it needs to be one verb. Yeah, it needs to be about balance, because like of course you have to consume. You have to take breaks from things. You have to eat. You got to do. Not only is it like I have to, I'm saying like it's very minus the necessity part of it. Like it's very fun to do these things, right? To like hop in and play WoW for 10 hours, or like go see a new movie, or read a fantasy book, whatever else. Like beyond the need for it, I think like it is good to develop both your own taste and like enjoy the fact that you're alive, which to me is what consuming is. But it's kind of like if that's the only thing you do, it's like more of a hedonistic lifestyle, right? Which kind of at the end of the day, slurping down. Yeah, if at the end of the day the only thing you're doing is like maximizing just your happiness along these sort of consumption dimensions, then maybe there's some other stuff to do. Well, also, who cares? I don't know if you're perfectly happy. Yeah, for me, it bothered me the idea that kind of forecasting out. I'm like, okay, I'm 31, and I've got like at least 40 more years of just like good ass kicking to do out in the world, which means I'm not even halfway there yet. And really, I've only been a person for like 11 years. Yeah, yeah. So because as we all know, before the age of 20, nothing counts. It's all just experiments at that point. That was just you forming. Yeah, you're still forming your brains. And so I'm really just getting started. And what pissed me off was the idea that I would just, for some reason, be totally satisfied with where I'm at and just be like, yep, that's it for me. Like, I'm just not gonna add anything to this. And that was kind of the road that I started walking down, just being like, yeah, this is fine now. It's just coasting time, right? So, but again, it all comes down to your values. So, yeah. What do you want to do? If you made a decision about it, then go do that thing. But if you haven't made a decision, then maybe take a step back and do that. All right, let's get on to some questions. We are sort of over time, but we can hit a question. I feel like
This question come from podcast.bscotch.net. So if you'd like to get your question on to a future episode, get over there and do that. First question and only question comes from PeanutEanut. What is the stance on parallel universes in your Bscotch universe? Are there alternate versions of Fluxx? Are your games in the same multiverse as us? All right. We need some definitions here.
I think the first thing to say is we haven't consciously made any decisions with respect to any of these questions.
Right. But we're about to
riff on it. At least. I'll put that verb in there. So I think that the idea is that in some of the Marvel universes and stuff they do, like in the Marvel universe, they'll sometimes just parallel split it. So this new Spider-Man movie, Into the Spider-Verse, is literally this idea, which is that there's actually many of these universes and there's like a different spider person in each one. I think there's a spider pig involved at some point also. So, so I think that's kind of the question. It's like, are there sort of those weird mirrors of this place?
I would say yes, but that's only because it makes it really easy to retcon stuff.
Yes. And also,
which is also why that is how the Marvel universe works.
Because you know what happened was probably I saw one where it was, I think all of the X-Men were zombies.
Oh, really?
Which is like a horrifying comic.
And if that really did happen, then now they're all dead. So that's
true. But like then
the rest of the X-Men story is kind of
basically, to me, it's one of those things where every so often the creator's like, it'd be fun. What if? And then, they twist like what if the Joker and the Batmans were actually like swapped in terms of which one was the hero and which one was the villain? What would that look like? And they're like, let's split the universe and make it. So they just do it.
Yeah, because that way the answer never has to be no, because we already did X. Now the answer can always be yes.
As I understand it, this is where the term like something being canon comes from, right? Because you've got the actual core story that is supposed to be the real thing, and that's canon. And then everything else, you can have all these weird spin-offs. And
no, I think those are all canon, aren't they?
I think that as long as they're made
if it's made by the official authority on the subject.
Yeah, I think they're all canon.
It's all canon.
They're all just different universes, I guess.
Yeah.
But to me, it's just a place to play. So yeah, I think
I would say
100%.
I would say that Crashlands, like all the stuff in the Butterscotch universe, is already a part of the multiverse, because these games are simulated abstractions of what really happened. Right? I mean,
sure, I guess.
Because I think about, you play a game like Skyrim or something. And it's like, oh, you want to go from town to town? All right, it's a 2-minute walk. That's not really how far it really is, in reality, because it's a real place, of course.
Right.
And it needs to be a condensed simulation so that you feel like you walked for a long time, because it's a long distance.
So do you think this is why in the real world, when you hop on an airplane, no matter how far the flight is, you tend to arrive tired, because it's actually, it's a simulation of what's happening.
It's because of all the loading.
Make you feel like you did a lot of stuff to get there, when in reality it was just fast travel sort of situation.
But if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that then you being in the airplane is now you being in a different universe?
No, I'm saying if you were to make
you're saying a game.
I'm saying if you were to make a game that had like New York City and St. Louis and Chicago, whatever, then you would like get in your car and drive like 2 minutes down the road.
Yeah. But you're saying that the simulation of the universe is the universe itself then in this case?
I'm saying a game about a thing is never the true story.
Oh yeah, man, of course. Like
it's
a story is never the true story,
right? It's always
a summary and a simulation of
it's an abstraction of the real thing.
But that doesn't actually answer the question about multiverses, because the question is, does Crashlands and Quadrupus and do those all take place in the same universe? Because of course it's true that our story, the way that we told each one of those stories, does not reflect the reality,
the real story
of the story. But I don't think that has, unless I'm very confused, I think that has no bearing on whether or not it's a multiverse.
I think you're right.
Yeah, it's probably true.
Okay, cool. I was trying to figure out where
just going.
I was trying to figure out the relationship, which is fine. Tangents are great. I just wasn't sure if it was a tangent.
Unless there's a multiverse where all the characters truly exist in video games.
Right. Well, but I think it's an important question. Is in this universe in which our creatures live, is that inside of video games actually?
It could be.
Because you're saying a story is an approximation of the truth. Is that actually true?
They just live in a game and they totally know that that's...
Yeah.
I think I've been lost for about 2 minutes.
Do they know or not know?
I don't know.
The long and the short of it is yes, multiverses because we want to have room to play.
Yeah,
That's
we haven't
what
made
that's
use
my
of them
answer.
on purpose,
Correct.
but at some point,
But I reserve the right to do
we
so.
want to be able to do that.
Well, we do. I mean, we do have the Crashlands comic,
Mhm.
which
But that's just like a different point in time.
it's a different point in time.
It's not a multiverse.
It's not a multiverse. So we haven't done any. So Gerblins, that's part of it.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Freeway Mutant.
It'd be like
Goop Legacy.
It's almost. It's more like if you flipped into like the upside down. That's what a multiverse is, right? Where it's like the same place but has different rules and is kind of
That's got aliens.
Different.
Well, no,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the Upside Down is part of the same universe because that's how the characters exist in it. They can. It's a place they can go.
well.
The,
but also
the multiverse is like a separate,
But not in the
complete-
case of Spider-Man Enter the Multiverse.
the whole idea with the multiverse oftentimes that you can sometimes you merge them because why not? Because that's fun, you know.
Oh,
And then-
I think the story of The Witcher is actually the same, which is like I think what happens in the Witcher series is that the normal human world gets, which only occasionally sort of lines up with this other crazy world where all the monsters are, like werewolves. and stuff.
assuming that the human world is the normal one and the monster world.
Yeah,
is the
maybe
crazy
they were
one.
having a good peaceful time over there. We fucked it all
yeah,
up.
each
but
one is a normal.
As far as I understand about humans are always the ones who create chaos and
it's generally true.
zaniness.
But the story is that they only occasionally would pass each other, which is why sometimes you'd have like a werewolf sort of slip through in one of these moments, and then at some point they got locked together, and so it sort of smashed these two parallel places together in a way that causes me.
I want to hear a story from the other multiverse where it's a universe of werewolves, and then they're all freaked out because this weird hairless
That's basically
monkey
Planet of the Apes.
just showed
That
up.
is true.
And they're
But
all
the
they're
original
all
Planet of
freaked
the
out
Apes.
about it
Yeah.
because why wouldn't you be?
Yeah, that'd be wild.
Yeah, it'd be wild if you saw a person walking around.
Actually reminds me of that. There's that episode of Rick and Morty because they're always going through parallel or multiverse, right? And there's that one where it's like what is it? It's like people are just furniture.
Oh
and
yeah,
it's like all the inanimate objects are actually the
I
sentient
think
beings.
it's where people are chairs.
They're like they're chairs and stuff. So like so then people are like posed as chairs and stuff, and then there are like phones sitting on them, and they're eating like cassette tapes. It's just fucking weird. But they really play with this idea though of the
Inverting it a little bit.
of inverting all of it.
Yeah, so we'll probably have that. We'll have some version of our game where everybody's a chair.
Yeah, but in that scene though, when the people are walking, because like Rick and Morty are walking around, and all the chairs are fucking freaked out. They're like staring out the window with these like horrified looks.
There's this really fucking crazy YouTube video called Too Many Cooks, which is a parody of like 80s sitcom opening scenes where the characters like their names appear on the screen and then they like look at and they smile and then in this parody thing it just keeps going and like more and more people keep showing up and it gets really dark. Like there's a murder that happens during this thing and then at some point the people become the subtitles, and then there are these like words walking around, and the people appear as a subtitle, and they're just screaming because they're like,
yeah, I think that's a good slip into a multiverse sort of situation. Yeah,
it's.
Be careful.
I wouldn't recommend watching it. It's pretty weird. So, anyways, I think that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producer Fat Bard for making us sound good. Thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. If you'd like to get more involved in the Butterscotch community, you can hop into our Discord server over at discord.gg/Bscotch. Also, if you would like to adorn your body with Butterscotch merch, you can check out the shop over at shop.bscotch.net. If you'd like to send us something, we've got a mailbox, which you can find the address for over at mailbox.bscotch.net. Last but not least, if you want us to grab your money, you can do that over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.